The first thing she heard was the crack of her father's jaw under Timothy's fist. It was a sound like a branch snapping in a silent forest, wet, final, and echoing in the grand, hollow foyer of the Blackwood pack house. Elizabeth flinched, the involuntary movement making the heavy silver chains around her wrists rattle against the marble floor where she knelt. The metallic scent of her father's blood bloomed in the air, thick and coppery, cutting through the smell of old wood and pack musk. "Enough, Timothy!" The voice that spoke was not loud, but it vibrated through the very stones of the mansion, a low frequency of absolute authority that made the hairs on Elizabeth's arms stand up. "He's paid the debt. The girl is the price. There's nothing more." She didn't dare look up. The rough burlap of the hood scratched her cheeks, and the world was a dark, suffocating tunnel. She focused on the cold marble seeping through the thin fabric of her dress, on the ache in her shoulders from being bound, on the frantic drum of her own heart. Little did I know, this was the last moment I would be invisible. "He's paid with her, Joseph." Timothy's voice was a sneer, slick with a cruelty that was as familiar to her as her own reflection. She could picture him wiping her father's blood from his knuckles onto his tailored trousers. But a worm like him deserves a few extra reminders about the consequences of stealing from an alpha. Especially your alpha. A low, warning growl rippled through the room, not from Timothy. This was deeper, older, a sound that seemed to come from the shadows themselves. It was the Alpha Joseph. The sound prickled over Elizabeth's skin, a bizarre mix of terror and something else. A primal recognition that made her stomach clench. "You are beta of this pack, Timothy, not its executioner. Stand down." Joseph's command left no room for argument. The air pressure in the room shifted, the dominance rolling off him in a nearly tangible wave. Elizabeth heard the subtle scuff of Timothy's boot as he stepped back, a hissed intake of breath his only protest. Footsteps approached her, measured and heavy. They stopped inches from her knees. She could feel the heat radiating from the body standing over her, could smell him, pine, frost, and the raw, wild edge of power. It was nothing like Timothy's cloying, aggressive scent of expensive cologne and malice. "Remove the hood." It wasn't a request. A hand, not gentle but efficient, yanked the coarse burlap sack from her head. The light of the chandelier was a blinding assault after the darkness. Elizabeth blinked, her eyes watering as the grand foyer came into focus. Vaulted ceilings, a sweeping staircase, the mounted heads of great beasts on the walls. And surrounding her, a semicircle of silent, watching werewolves. Their eyes glinted in the light, amber, gold, and blue, all fixed on her with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Her gaze, blurred by tears, lifted to the man before her. Alpha Joseph Blackwood was not what she had expected. The stories painted him as a monster, a gargantuan beast of a man who ruled the most powerful pack in the territory with a fist of iron. The man before her was tall, yes, and built with the lethal grace of a predator, but his monstrosity was in his stillness. He was carved from winter itself, sharp, pale features, hair the color of ravens' wings, and eyes that were a chilling, crystalline blue. They weren't the warm gold of most shifters. They were the blue of glacier ice, and they were currently dissecting her with an unnerving, detached intensity. He was dressed in simple black, his sleeves rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and traced with the faint, silvery lines of old scars. He looked bored, as if the acquisition of a new possession was a tedious formality. "Look at her," Timothy chuckled from the side, his voice a poison-tipped dart aimed directly at her heart. "Pathetic. A scrawny little mouse sold to settle a debt. I told you, Joseph. Her father swore she was of value, but look. She's barely more than skin and bones. And that face." He let the sentence hang, the insult louder for its incompletion. Elizabeth kept her head bowed, her long, unkempt brown hair falling like a curtain around her face. She knew what he saw. The too-thin frame, the simple, worn dress, the dirt smudged on her skin from the journey. She was a pawn, a peace offering from her weak, rogue-born father to the strongest alpha in the region to forgive a gambling debt that could have been paid with his life. She was meant to be a servant, a drudge, unnoticed, unattractive, safe. Joseph's ice-blue eyes didn't leave her. He crouched down, bringing himself to her level. The movement was fluid, predatory. Her breath hitched. He reached out, and his fingers, surprisingly warm, brushed the hair away from the side of her face. His touch was a brand. She jerked back instinctively, the chains clanking. A faint, almost imperceptible frown touched his lips. His gaze sharpened, zeroing in on her eyes, which she knew were a plain, unremarkable hazel. But he stared as if he were looking for something buried deep within them. "What is your name?" His voice was quieter now, a rumble meant only for her. She swallowed, her throat dry as dust. "Elizabeth," she whispered. The word felt like a secret torn from her. "Elizabeth," he repeated. Her name in his mouth sounded different. Weighted. It wasn't the mocking tone Timothy used or the fearful whisper of her father. It was a statement. A claim. That was my first mistake, letting him hear my voice. "Look at me, Elizabeth." The command was soft, but undeniable. Slowly, forcing down the tremor that wanted to seize her, she lifted her chin and met his glacial gaze. The moment their eyes locked, something happened. A jolt, like a live wire touching her spine. Joseph's eyes widened a fraction. A low, almost inaudible sound vibrated in his chest. It wasn't a growl of threat. It was something confused, compelled. The air between them crackled, thick with a sudden, inexplicable tension. She felt a pull, a magnetic draw toward him that was as terrifying as it was instinctive. Her heart wasn't just beating now. It was trying to escape her ribs. "What is this? Joseph?" Timothy's voice cut through the spell, laced with suspicion. "The formalities are done. Let the Omegas take her to the scullery. She reeks of rogue and fear." Joseph didn't move. His eyes were still trapped with hers. "She is not an Omega," he said, his voice strangely distant, as if he were listening to something else. "Her scent, it's muted. Deliberately." Before Elizabeth could process the horror of his words, before she could clamp down on the panic that surged like a tidal wave, the massive oak doors of the foyer burst open. A woman swept in, the click of her heels on marble as sharp as gunshots. She was stunning, with waves of honey-blonde hair and eyes like melted chocolate. She moved with the confident grace of high rank, her elegant dress swishing around her. This was Olivia, the pack's head Omega, the woman who managed the household and, according to whispered rumors, had ambitions to be much more. "Joseph, darling, you're back." Her voice was a smooth, cultured purr. She barely glanced at Elizabeth, her focus entirely on the Alpha. "And you've brought us a new project." Her smile was beautiful and utterly devoid of warmth. She finally let her gaze drop to Elizabeth, and her perfect nose wrinkled slightly. "Oh, my, the rogue's daughter. Timothy mentioned she was unrefined. I'll have her cleaned and put to work in the kitchens immediately. We're short a pot scrubber." Joseph finally broke eye contact with Elizabeth, standing to his full height. The loss of his gaze felt like a physical coldness. "No," he said, his voice back to its usual imperious tone. "Not the kitchens." Olivia's smile froze. "Pardon. She will be given chambers in the East Wing, the Amber Room." His announcement dropped into the silent foyer like a stone. A collective, sharp intake of breath came from the assembled pack members. Timothy's face darkened. Olivia's flawless composure cracked, revealing a flash of sheer, venomous shock. "The Amber Room? Joseph, that's for honored guests. For potential allies. not for a debt payment. Joseph turned his icy stare on her. Are you questioning your alpha, Olivia? She paled, immediately bowing her head, a submissive gesture that didn't reach her eyes. Of course not, Alpha. I merely seek to understand. You don't need to understand. You need to obey. He looked back at Elizabeth, who was trembling, trying to make herself smaller. The Alpha's next words sealed her fate. Remove her chains. She is not a prisoner. She is a guest. What happened next changed everything. As a hulking, silent werewolf with kind, tired eyes, Leo, she would later learn, the pack's head of security, stepped forward with a key. Timothy exploded. This is an insult, he roared, his control shattering. His own eyes flashed a violent gold. You coddle this filthy rogue spawn while my father, your loyal beta for 20 years, lies in his grave because of rogues like her kin. She should be in the dungeons, not a guest suite. Spittle flew from his lips, his body trembling with the effort of holding his wolf back. Joseph moved so fast he was a blur. 1 second he was near Elizabeth, the next he had Timothy by the throat, slamming him against the stone wall with a force that shook the foundation. The growl that tore from Joseph's throat was pure, undiluted alpha fury. It was a sound of breaking bones and tearing flesh, a promise of violence held by a thread. You, Joseph snarled, his face inches from Timothy's, are treading on the edge of treason, Beta. Your father's death is not her crime. Your grief does not give you the right to dictate my decisions. Remember your place, or I will remind you. Permanently. The threat hung in the air, lethal and cold. Timothy's face was mottled with rage and lack of air, but he saw the truth in Joseph's eyes. He went limp, a low whine escaping him, a wolf's sign of submission. Joseph released him, letting him drop to the floor in a heap. He straightened his sleeves, the act chillingly casual after the display of brutal power. He didn't look at Timothy again. Leo, see to Elizabeth. Get her settled. Olivia, have a bath drawn and suitable clothes brought to the amber room. Now, Leo helped Elizabeth to her feet. Her legs were numb, wobbling beneath her. As the heavy silver cuffs fell away, the relief was immediate, but the new fear was paralyzing. The amber room? Why? As Leo guided her gently but firmly toward the grand staircase, she passed Timothy, who was slowly getting to his feet. His eyes, burning with hatred, locked onto hers. This isn't over, little mouse, he hissed, voice raw from the choking. You don't belong here. I'll make sure you remember that. She hurried up the stairs, feeling his gaze and Joseph's, both equally intense for vastly different reasons, burning into her back. The amber room was a gilded cage. It was spacious, opulently furnished in gold and deep orange hues, with a large 4-poster bed and a fireplace crackling with welcoming warmth. A copper tub steamed in front of it, filled with scented water. Clean, simple clothes were laid out on the bed. Bath's ready, Leo said, his voice a gentle rumble. He stood by the door, a massive, quiet sentinel. I'll be right outside if you need anything, Miss Elizabeth. There was no mockery in his tone, only a weary kindness. Alone, Elizabeth sank to the floor, her back against the door. The events of the last hour crashed over her. The sound of her father's breaking jaw, the glacial blue of Joseph's eyes, and that terrifying electric pull. Timothy's venom, Olivia's icy disdain, the opulent room that felt like a trap. She hugged her knees to her chest, a sob building in her throat, but she choked it back. Crying was a luxury she couldn't afford. She had to think. Joseph's words echoed. Her scent is muted, deliberately. He knew, or he suspected. Her carefully constructed disguise, the years of hiding in plain sight, of using the rare herbs her mother had taught her to blend her natural scent, to appear weak and unremarkable. It was crumbling on the first day. A soft knock at the door made her jump. Miss, your bath will get cold. It was a young female voice, an Omega servant. "I'm coming," Elizabeth called, her voice shaky. She forced herself to stand. The bath was a necessity. She needed to wash off the grime of travel, the scent of fear, and reapply the masking tincture. The small, precious vial was sewn into the hem of her discarded dress. It was her only shield. She undressed quickly, sinking into the blissfully hot water with a gasp. For a few minutes, she just let the heat seep into her bones, trying to quiet the storm in her mind. The pull she felt toward Joseph, it was the mate bond. It had to be. The curse of her lineage, the very thing she'd been hiding from her entire life, had recognized its counterpart in the most dangerous man imaginable. An alpha king. And if he claimed her. No, she couldn't be his Luna. She wouldn't survive the politics, the spotlight, the enemies like Timothy. She was here to be invisible, to serve a sentence and hopefully, one day, disappear. The mate bond was a death sentence. She washed thoroughly, then retrieved the small vial. The herbal mixture inside was murky and bitter-smelling. She dabbed it on her pulse points, wrists, throat, behind her ears, the ritual as familiar as breathing. The subtle, unique fragrance of her, the one Joseph had almost caught, faded under the cloak of bland, earthy notes. Wrapped in a soft towel, she walked to the full-length mirror in the corner, steeling herself. She saw the same plain, thin face, the wide, frightened hazel eyes. But as she leaned closer, pushing her damp hair back, she saw it. The reason for the hood, the reason for the hair in her face. The secret her father had traded to save his own life. From her right temple, snaking down just past her hairline and curling around the shell of her ear, was a mark. It wasn't a scar. It was a delicate, intricate pattern of silvery white lines, like frost on a windowpane or the veins of a celestial leaf. It was beautiful and utterly unnatural on a human, or a normal werewolf. It was the mark of the lost moon, a birthmark said to belong only to the direct descendants of the original, banished lunar priestesses. Wolves of such pure and potent lineage, their power was considered a myth. A myth that alphas would kill to possess, or destroy. The mark usually lay dormant, invisible, but stress, fear, or the proximity of a powerful mate could make it gleam. She touched it now. It was warm. A floorboard creaked behind her. Elizabeth whirled, clutching the towel to her chest. Joseph stood inside the room, having entered with silent, predatory grace. He had changed into dark trousers and a simple black shirt, the top buttons undone. He leaned against the doorframe he had closed behind him, his arms crossed. His glacial eyes swept over her, from her damp hair, over the towel, to her bare feet on the rug. They missed nothing, including, she realized with a bolt of sheer terror, the silvery mark on her temple, now fully exposed. His gaze locked onto it. All the bored detachment was gone, replaced by a fierce, blazing intensity. The air left the room. He pushed off the doorframe and took one step, then two, toward her. The animal magnetism, the mate pull, was a physical force, dragging her toward him. She stumbled back, her heels hitting the wall. Nowhere to run. He stopped just before her, so close she could feel the heat of his body, could see the flecks of silver in the blue of his irises. His focus was entirely on the mark. His expression was one of stunned, furious revelation. "So," Joseph whispered, his voice a low, dangerous thunder that vibrated in her very bones. He reached out, his fingers hovering just above her skin, not touching the mark, but she felt its heat intensify under his attention. The ragged little debt payment is a living treasure, a ghost from a forgotten legend. His eyes finally snapped to hers, capturing her, seeing straight through every lie, every drop of her masking tincture. "Tell me, Elizabeth, what other secrets are you hiding under this pretty, deceptive veil?" The pad of his thumb was still pressed against the mark on her wrist, a point of searing contact. Joseph Blackwood's eyes, molten gold and utterly shocked, held hers. He knows, Elizabeth thought, her blood turning to ice water. He knows what it is. A sharp, pained gasp broke the spell. It came from Olivia. The head Omega stood rigid, her knuckles white where she gripped her ledger, her pretty face a mask of bewildered betrayal. The sound made Joseph blink. The intense, intimate focus he'd fixed on Elizabeth shattered, replaced by a swift, calculating authority. He released her wrist, but his gaze never wavered. "Leo," Joseph said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in the marble foyer. "Alpha." Leo was at his side in an instant, his kind eyes wide with confusion. "Escort our guest to the amber room in the east wing. Ensure she is not disturbed." His command was absolute, leaving no room for question. The amber room," Timothy choked out, lurching forward before catching himself. The red imprint of Joseph's hand still bloomed on his cheek. "Joseph, that's for dignitaries. She's a rogue's whelp, a debt payment. The scullery, the dungeons, anywhere but there." Joseph didn't even look at him. "You are dismissed, Timothy. Go cool your temper and your tongue." The threat was velvet-wrapped steel. He finally turned his head just slightly towards Olivia. "Have a bath drawn for her. And find suitable clothes. Nothing from the servants' quarters." If Olivia had looked betrayed before, now she looked eviscerated. "Alpha, the protocols, the Omega's rotation." "See it done." It was not a request. The finality in his tone made her flinch. She gave a stiff, shallow nod, her eyes burning with hatred as they swept over Elizabeth's filthy, hooded form. "This way, miss," Leo said gently, his hand a guiding pressure on her elbow. It was the first kind touch she'd felt since her father shoved her into the debt collector's cart. She stumbled after him, her legs numb, the heavy chain between her ankles a cruel parody of a lady's gait. As Leo led her towards the grand, sweeping staircase, she felt the weight of 3 stairs on her back. Joseph's, hot and intense, Timothy's a promise of violence, and Olivia's cold and plotting. What happened next changed everything, she would think later. The moment he saw the mark, I ceased to be a prisoner and became a puzzle. And in a place like this, puzzles are either solved or destroyed. The East Wing was a world apart from the militant grandeur of the foyer. Here, the air was warmer, scented with beeswax and dried lavender. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, catching motes of dust that danced like gold flecks. The carpets were thick and silent underfoot. "Here we are," Leo said, unlocking a double oak door with an ornate, amber-colored key. The amber room stole the breath Elizabeth didn't realize she was holding. It was vast, awash in hues of honey, gold, and sunset orange. A canopy bed draped in saffron silk dominated the space. A fireplace, currently cold, had a mantel carved from what looked like a single piece of amber. Bookshelves lined one wall, and French doors led to a small balcony overlooking manicured gardens. "It's too much," she whispered, her voice raspy from disuse and fear. "It's the Alpha's order," Leo said simply. He knelt, surprisingly agile for his size, and produced a small key from his pocket. "Let's get these off you." The manacles clicked open, and the terrible weight fell from her ankles and wrists. The relief was so immediate and profound she swayed, the raw, chafed skin stinging in the open air. Leo caught her arm, steadying her. "Easy now, you're safe here. The Alpha's word is law. But what does his word intend for me?" She thought, clutching her marked wrist. As if summoned by her thought, a procession arrived. Omegas, led by a stone-faced Olivia, filed in carrying copper cans of steaming water, pouring them into a sunken tub in an adjoining bathing chamber. They scattered rose petals and salts, their movements efficient and silent. They avoided looking at her directly, but she felt their curiosity and disdain like a physical chill. Olivia stopped before her, holding a bundle of dark, soft fabric. "The Alpha has commanded you be made presentable," she said, her voice dripping with a frosty civility. "You will bathe. You will wear this. You will then await the Alpha's pleasure in the sitting room." She thrust the clothes into Elizabeth's arms. "Do not dally. The water will grow cold." The Omegas left, closing the door with a soft but definitive click. The lock turned. Alone, truly alone for the first time since her father lost that final, fateful hand of cards. The silence was a roaring in her ears. She stumbled into the bathing chamber, the steam warming her cold bones. With trembling fingers, she peeled off the ragged, stinking clothes she'd worn for weeks, letting them fall to the floor in a heap of misery. She sank into the tub, the hot water scalding and blissful on her dirty skin. She scrubbed until her skin was pink, washing away the grime of the road, the scent of fear, and the lingering touch of her old life. The clothes Olivia provided were simple but fine. A soft, charcoal gray wool dress, high-necked and long-sleeved. It was plain, but the material was expensive, and it fit her reasonably well. It covered the mark on her wrist. Was that intentional? She combed her fingers through her wet, dark hair, leaving it to dry in waves down her back. The sitting area of the amber room held a small sofa and 2 chairs by the cold fireplace. She sat on the edge of a chair, back straight, hands folded in her lap, waiting. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked loudly, each second a hammer blow to her nerves. "If only I had known what my father's mark would one day cost me," she thought, her fingers tracing the hidden, raised skin. It was a legacy she never asked for, a secret her drunken, cowardly father had sworn her to keep. "They'll kill you for it, girl," he'd slurred, one of the few times he'd spoken of her mother. "Or worse, they'll use you." The lock clicked. Her heart leapt into her throat. Joseph Blackwood entered, closing the door softly behind him. He had changed as well, now in a simple black tunic and trousers, but he wore his power no less imposingly. He carried a small, ancient-looking wooden box. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at her, his gaze a physical sweep that took in the clean lines of her face, the dark hair against the gray wool, the way her hands clenched together in her lap. The terrified, filthy creature from the foyer was gone. In her place sat a young woman of stark, haunting beauty, with eyes the color of a storm-washed sky. "Elizabeth," he said, her name a rough caress on his tongue. He moved to stand before the fireplace, setting the box on the mantel. "You are not what you seem." She said nothing. What could she say? "Your father, a rogue, a gambler, a weak man," Joseph stated, each word a precise cut. "And yet he carried a daughter with the celestial mark of Selene, a mark thought to be myth, a mark of pure-born lineage, untouched by hybrid bloodlines. Explain." So he knew its name. The ice in her veins returned. "I cannot," she whispered. "Cannot or will not. I do not know its meaning, Alpha," she said, which was mostly true. "My father told me only to hide it, always." Joseph studied her, his wolf close to the surface, judging her scent for falsehood. He seemed to find none. He opened the wooden box. From it, he drew a single sheet of vellum, brittle with age. "The Blackwood archives are extensive. This is a copy of a fragment from the Lost Chronicles. It speaks of the mark. It says the bearer is a direct descendant of the first shifters, blessed, or cursed, by the moon goddess herself. It is a mark of latent, untapped power, a key to old magics." He approached her, the fragment in his hand. He didn't sit, forcing her to look up at him, establishing the dynamic between them. Ruler and subject, hunter and not quite prey, something else. "Why did your father have you?" he mused, more to himself than to her. "A man like that, was it chance, or was he hiding you?" He leaned down, bracing his hands on the arms of her chair, caging her in. His scent, pine and snow and alpha power enveloped her. Who was your mother, Elizabeth? The question was the one she feared most. She squeezed her eyes shut. I never knew her. She died when I was born. My father would never speak of her. Joseph was silent for a long moment. Then he did something that shocked her. He knelt. He was now at her eye level, his gaze searching, intense, but no longer merely predatory. There was a desperate curiosity there, a need. The mark, it calls to me, he confessed, his voice low, strained. It has since I first saw it. It is a pull I do not understand. It is not the mate bond, it is something older, deeper. He reached out, his fingers hovering over her covered wrist. May I? Terrified, mesmerized, she gave a tiny nod. He pushed back the sleeve of her dress, revealing the mark. In the soft light of the room, it seemed to glow faintly, an intricate spiral of silvery lines like a constellation against her skin. He traced it with a fingertip, and a jolt, like static electricity mixed with a deep, resonant hum, passed between them. He inhaled sharply. A frantic pounding on the door shattered the moment. Alpha, Alpha, you are needed. It was Leo, his voice urgent. Joseph stood in one fluid, powerful motion, his face hardening back into the mask of command. What is it? A perimeter breach, Alpha, South Woods. The guards, they're reporting rogue scents. A lot of them. Joseph's eyes flashed pure gold. He looked from Elizabeth's wrist to her terrified face. The calculation was back, swift and ruthless. They are not here for territory, he said, the words cold and sure. They are here for her. He turned and strode to the door, yanking it open. Leo stood there, breathless. Triple the guards on this wing. No one enters or leaves without my direct order. No one, he commanded, his gaze slicing towards the hallway where Olivia and several other pack members had gathered, drawn by the commotion. Timothy was among them, his eyes gleaming with a dark, anticipatory fire. Joseph looked back at Elizabeth, a silent promise and a warning in his eyes. It seems your arrival has stirred up more than just dust, Elizabeth. Stay here. Do not open this door for anyone but me or Leo. He left, pulling the door shut. The lock turned again, a sound of finality. But this time she was not just a prisoner. She was a prize. From the balcony, she heard the sounds begin. The distant, hair-raising howls of wolves, Blackwood sentries giving alarm. Then, answering howls from the dark tree line, savage and hungry. The clash of snarls and the terrible sound of tearing flesh soon followed, carried on the wind. They were fighting, dying for her. She backed away from the balcony doors, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. The opulent amber room felt like a gilded cage. The mark on her wrist pulsed, a warm, insistent throb in time with the distant chaos. If only I had known, she thought again, sinking onto the bed, that my father didn't just sell me to pay a debt. He sold me to start a war. Downstairs in the war room, Joseph stared at a map, the reports of his scouts ringing in his ears. Timothy stood across from him, vibrating with fury. They're coordinated, Joseph. This isn't a random rogue band. They're probing our defenses, trying to find a weak spot to infiltrate the mansion itself. Joseph knew he was right. The rogues weren't trying to claim land. They were on a retrieval mission. He thought of the mark, of the ancient fragment, of the terrified, beautiful girl upstairs who was the key to a power he barely understood. They want her back, Joseph growled, or they want her dead. Then give her to them, Timothy exploded. Throw her out the gates and be done with it. She's nothing but trouble. My father died because of rogue filth like her and her kind. Joseph moved faster than sight. He was across the table, his hand around Timothy's throat, slamming him into the stone wall. She is mine. The words were a primal snarl, filled with a possessiveness that shocked even him. The debt is paid. Her life is Blackwood. And you will protect what is mine, Beta, or you will join the rogues in the dirt. Do you understand? Timothy, choking, his eyes wide with fear and fury, managed a strangled gasp. Why, yes, Alpha. Joseph released him, turning back to the map. The revelation shook him to his core. He hadn't just claimed her as pack property. He had claimed her as his mate. And as the sounds of battle echoed from the woods, a new, more terrifying sound reached his enhanced hearing. It was the sound of claws scraping against stone, of a forced, quiet entry, coming not from outside, but from inside the east wing itself. Upstairs, huddled on the bed, Elizabeth heard it too. A soft scratch tap at the French doors to her balcony. Not a wolf's claw, a human finger. Her blood ran cold. Leo was guarding the hall door. Joseph was downstairs. No one should be on a third-floor balcony. The handle of the French door began, slowly, to turn. Scratch, scrape, scratch. The sound at the balcony door was a living thing, a dry, insistent clawing that cut through the distant, muffled thunder of the southern battle. Elizabeth froze, the fine silk of her borrowed dress suddenly feeling like a shroud. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat answering the rhythm of the attack, one outside, one terrifyingly close. Scratch, screech. It wasn't an animal. It was methodical. Someone was trying to pry the door open from the outside of the balcony, someone who had scaled the east wing. Or, a colder thought slithered into her mind, someone who had come from within the mansion and was now on her balcony, pretending to break in. The guards Joseph posted at her chamber door were meant to keep threats out. What if the threat was already in? "Hello," she called out, her voice a thin, reedy thing. The scratching stopped. Silence, thick and heavy, pressed in. Then a low, guttural whisper seeped through the seam of the door. "Little star, we see your light." Elizabeth stumbled back, her legs hitting the edge of the plush settee. The voice was unfamiliar, laced with a hunger that had nothing to do with flesh. It knew about the mark. The rogues outside weren't just a random attack. They had allies inside. Her eyes darted to the chamber door. Leo was out there. But if she screamed, would the thing on the balcony break through before he could enter? The door handle jiggled, then rattled with sudden, violent force. Bang, bang, bang. "Leo!" she screamed, the sound tearing from her throat. The chamber door burst inward instantly. Leo and two other guards flooded in, weapons drawn. Their eyes went straight to the balcony, where the silhouette of a hunched figure was now visible through the gauzy curtains, clawed hands working at the lock. "Protect her," Leo barked, and the two younger guards positioned themselves between Elizabeth and the door while Leo charged forward. What happened next changed everything. Instead of shattering the glass, the figure outside gave one last, furious scrape and then vanished. Leo wrenched the balcony door open, the cold night air rushing in, carrying the scent of pine and far-off smoke. He leaned over the railing, scanning the walls and grounds below. "Gone," he muttered, turning back. His face was grim. "They're agile, and they knew exactly where to find you." Elizabeth wrapped her arms around herself, trembling. "It spoke to me. It called me Little Star." Leo's weary eyes widened a fraction. He nodded, a gesture of grim confirmation. "The Alpha needs to know this. Now." He turned to the guards. "No one enters. Not Beta Timothy, not Head Omega Olivia. No one but the Alpha himself." "Understood." As the guards nodded, a new sound rose, not an alarm, but the deep, resonant howl of a wolf from the direction of the south woods. It was answered by another, and another, a chorus of triumph. The battle sounds were dying down. The pack was prevailing. But in the quiet of the amber room, the victory felt hollow. The real war, Elizabeth sensed, had just stepped out of the shadows and scratched at her door. Joseph's return to the mansion was not a victory march, but a storm given form. He strode through the grand foyer, the scent of blood, smoke, and pine clinging to his leathers. His knuckles were raw, and a shallow claw mark scored his cheek, already healing. Behind him, a contingent of warriors followed, their expressions hard. Timothy entered from a side corridor, his own armor dented, his face a mask of simmering resentment. The southern perimeter is secure. For now, we lost 3. They lost 24. It was a slaughter. It was a diversion, Joseph said, his voice a low growl that echoed in the vaulted space. He didn't break stride, heading for the east wing staircase. A costly one, Timothy spat, keeping pace. For what? The girl? It makes no tactical sense. They threw away wolves to get to a single, worthless. Joseph stopped so abruptly Timothy nearly collided with him. The Alpha turned, and the sheer, predatory force in his gaze made the Beta take an involuntary step back. The next time you call her worthless, Timothy, you will join the rogues in the dirt. Is my meaning clear? The air crackled with dominance. Timothy's jaw worked, but he lowered his eyes, a submissive gesture that was pure poison. Crystal Alpha. The attack was coordinated, but the force was disposable. Their best fighters weren't in the woods. Joseph resumed his climb, taking the steps 2 at a time. They were here. He reached the east wing corridor to find Leo standing rigidly outside the amber room door. The older wolf's posture told him everything. Report. A breach attempt, Alpha, on the balcony. Single entity, agile, unknown affiliation. It spoke to her before fleeing. It referenced her light. Leo's voice was steady, but a deep unease lined his face. The guards never saw it approach. It knew the architecture. Joseph's blood ran cold, then hot with a fury so profound it was silent. They had scaled his walls, whispered threats to Elizabeth, his mate. The word, now acknowledged, burned in his soul with a truth he could no longer deny or rationalize. The pull he felt wasn't just curiosity about her mark. It was possession, need, a primal imperative older than his title. "Leave us," he commanded Leo and the hallway guards. He entered the amber room, closing the door softly behind him. Elizabeth stood in the center of the sitting area, pale but upright, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She looked ethereal in the soft amber light, the elegant dress making her seem both more fragile and more regal. The fear in her eyes was a tangible scent, but beneath it, he sensed a stubborn core of resilience that had kept her alive on the fringes with a coward for a father. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice rougher than he intended. She shook her head. "No, it didn't get in." He crossed the room in a few strides, stopping before her. He didn't touch her, but his presence enveloped her. "What did it say to you? Exactly." "It said, 'Little star, we see your light.'" She met his gaze, her own full of a terrified confusion that mirrored his own strategic dread. "What does it mean, Joseph? What is this mark? And why does everyone want me because of it?" Her use of his name, direct and unadorned, sent a jolt through him. He exhaled, the battle tension seeping from his shoulders, replaced by a heavier, more complex weight. "It means the legends in my archives are not just stories. And it means you are the most valuable and dangerous being in this territory." He gestured to the settee. "Sit." She obeyed, and he sat opposite her, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. "The celestial mark is a birthright, a direct lineage from the first shifters, the original children of the moon goddess Selene. It is said they could commune with her, that their power was not just of the wolf, but of the moon itself. Over millennia, the bloodline diluted. The mark faded into myth. "But I have it," she whispered, her fingers instinctively moving toward her covered shoulder. "You have it," he confirmed, his eyes locked on hers. "And with it, latent abilities that haven't been seen for centuries. Abilities that could unite packs under a single banner or shatter them. You are a symbol, Elizabeth, a key, A prize. His voice dropped. And it seems my mate. She flinched as if struck. Mate, that's the bond you mentioned. The pull. It's more than that, he admitted, the confession feeling strangely liberating. The mate bond is powerful, but this feels ancestral, as if my blood recognizes yours from the dawn of our kind. It's why I couldn't send you to the scullery. Why the thought of Timothy touching you made me want to tear his throat out. I have claimed you before my pack. You are under my protection. But that protection has now made you the target of every power that seeks to control the legend. Elizabeth's mind reeled. A descendant of gods, a key to power, the mate of an alpha king. It was a fantastical nightmare. I don't have any power, I'm nobody. My father was a rogue, a gambler. My mother, she trailed off, the old, aching emptiness opening up. I never knew her, he never spoke of her, just that she left. Joseph's gaze sharpened. That is the question, isn't it? Who was she? A rogue with hidden lineage, a runaway from a noble house. Your father's cowardice and his debts, they kept you hidden. A gem buried in mud. But someone else knew. Someone has been looking for you, and now they found you. A heavy knock sounded at the door. Alpha. It was Leo's voice, tense. You are needed. We have a prisoner from the southern assault. He's demanding to speak to you. About the star-marked. Joseph stood, his expression turning to granite. He looked down at Elizabeth. Stay here. Leo will be outside. Do not open that door for anyone. Where are you going? She asked, rising to her feet. To get answers, he said. And then, in a move that shocked them both, he reached out and cupped her cheek. His touch was searing, electric, a current that connected directly to the mark on her shoulder, making it thrum with a warm, resonant energy. Her breath caught. You are not nobody. You are mine, and I do not lose what is mine. He left then, leaving Elizabeth standing alone, her skin burning where he had touched her, the echo of his declaration. You are mine, warring with the chilling whisper from the balcony. Little star. The dungeons of the Blackwood mansion were carved from cold, gray stone, smelling of damp earth and old iron. The captured rogue was chained in a central cell, held upright by two burly guards. He was battered but conscious, his eyes gleaming with a fanatical light. Joseph approached, Timothy a dark shadow at his shoulder. You asked for me, Joseph said, his voice echoing in the vaulted space. The rogue spat blood on the floor. Alpha Blackwood, the keeper of the star, for now. What do you want with her? Joseph's question was a blade. Not me, the rogue chuckled, a wet, broken sound. The prophet wants her. She belongs with us, with the true children of Selene. Not locked in a gilded cage by a power-hungry alpha who wants to use her as a weapon. Prophet, Timothy sneered. You follow the ravings of some lunatic. The rogue's eyes snapped to Timothy. He has seen the light in the darkness. He knows the marked one is the dawn of a new age. She will cleanse the corrupt packs, starting with yours, Blackwood. She will lead us. She is my mate, Joseph stated, the words a flat, undeniable decree. The rogue's laughter turned into a coughing fit. A biological fluke, a trick of the old magic to deliver her to a place of strength. The bond is a tool for her protection until she comes into her power. The prophet can sever it. He can set her free. A cold, primal rage ignited in Joseph's chest. The idea of the bond being severed, of Elizabeth being taken, of this prophet touching what was his. He took a step forward, his aura of dominance flooding the cell, making the guards shudder. The rogue's bravado faltered. Where is this prophet? Joseph's voice was deathly quiet. Close, the rogue whispered, a smile stretching his split lips. He has eyes everywhere, even in your pretty mansion. The girl's father gambled for a reason, Alpha. He was running, and we were always right behind him. The pieces slammed together in Joseph's mind with terrifying clarity. The father's constant movement, the desperation of his debts. He wasn't just a gambler. He was a man trying to outrun a fanatical cult that sought his daughter. He'd finally crashed into Joseph's territory, thinking the Alpha's protection was the lesser evil. He'd been wrong. He'd led the wolf straight to the door. If only Joseph had known the depth of the threat, he would have never left her side. "Timothy," Joseph said, not taking his eyes off the prisoner. "Double the patrols, triple the guards on the east wing. I want every stranger on our territory found." "You're letting this filth dictate our strategy," Timothy argued, his frustration boiling over. "This prophet is a ghost story told by mad dogs. The threat is outside our walls, not within." Scratch, scrape, scratch. The memory of the sound on Elizabeth's balcony was a siren in Joseph's mind. "You are wrong," he said, his tone final. "The greatest threat is already inside." He turned to leave, the prisoner's mad laughter following him. "She will shine for us, Blackwood. You cannot hide her light forever." Joseph didn't look back. He moved through the dungeons and back up into the mansion with single-minded purpose. The external attack, the balcony breach, the prisoner's ravings, they were all threads of the same web. And Elizabeth was at the center. He reached the east wing to find the corridor in quiet chaos. Leo was gone from his post. The two door guards were slumped against the wall, unconscious but breathing. The door to the amber room stood slightly ajar. Joseph's wolf surged to the surface, a snarl tearing from his human throat. He crossed the distance in a blur and pushed the door open. The sitting room was empty. The balcony door was closed, but the door to the lavish bathing chamber was open. And from within, he heard a voice, a calm, smooth, cultured voice that did not belong. "You see, my child, you have been living a lie. That man out there is not your destiny. He is your jailer. Come with me, and I will show you who you were born to be." Joseph stepped silently to the bathing chamber entrance. Elizabeth stood facing a man dressed in the simple, dark linen of an upper servant. He was tall, slender, with silver-streaked hair and eyes of a pale, almost luminous gray. He held no weapon. He simply stood with an air of serene authority. This was no rogue. This was someone who had walked through the heart of the Blackwood pack unseen. The man, the prophet, smiled, sensing Joseph's presence. He didn't turn. "Ah, the Alpha arrives. Too late, I fear. The choice is already made." Elizabeth's eyes were wide, locked on the prophet's, glazed with a strange, captivated light. She took a step toward him. "Elizabeth," Joseph commanded, the Alpha power saturating her name. "Look at me." Her head turned slowly, her eyes struggling to focus on him. The prophet had done something to her, was weaving some compulsion tied to the mark. "The bond is a chain, little star," the prophet murmured, his voice like a hypnotic melody. "I can set you free. I can show you your mother." At the word mother, Elizabeth's resolve broke. A single, desperate tear traced down her cheek. She took another step toward the prophet. Joseph moved, but the prophet was faster. He didn't attack Joseph. Instead, he reached out and placed his fingertips on Elizabeth's marked shoulder, right through the fabric of her dress. A blinding, silvery light erupted from the point of contact, filling the room with the scent of ozone and wild moonlight. Elizabeth cried out, not in pain, but in shock, as the mark on her shoulder blazed like a miniature moon. The light hit Joseph like a physical wall, not burning, but repelling, pushing him back with the force of an ancient, sacred barrier. He fought against it, his muscles straining, a roar of pure fury building in his chest. The prophet looked at him over Elizabeth's shoulder, those pale eyes triumphant. "You see, Alpha, you cannot touch her, not when the goddess's own power awakens. She was never yours to keep." He wrapped an arm around Elizabeth's waist, her body now limp and glowing in his hold. With his other hand, he threw a small, crystalline orb to the marble floor. It shattered, not with sound, but with light and a concussive wave of disorientation. When Joseph's vision cleared, blinking against the afterimages, the bathing chamber was empty. The prophet and Elizabeth were gone. Only the fading, moon-scented echo of her power remained, and the balcony door swaying gently on its hinges, opening to the empty, mocking night. Joseph Blackwood, the Alpha King, stood alone in the silent, opulent ruin of his own home. He had expected an unattractive bride. He had found a mate, a legend, and a war. And now he had lost her. The silence in the amber room was absolute, and it was a physical blow. Joseph stood frozen in the doorway, the scent of ozone and crushed amber flowers hanging in the air where Elizabeth and the prophet had been. The guards groaned at his feet. His mate was gone, taken. The victory in the South Woods was ash in his mouth. What happened next would change everything, not just for his pack, but for their entire world. A low, guttural sound tore from his throat, a raw blend of fury and agony that echoed off the marble. He threw his head back and roared. It was not the command of an alpha, but the primal cry of a beast whose heart had been ripped from its chest. The very stones of the mansion seemed to tremble. Thump, thump, thump. The pounding of urgent footsteps answered his cry. Leo skidded into view, his face pale, a fresh cut on his brow. "Alpha, the perimeter is secure, but we found more of their devices in the north." He stopped dead, taking in the scene. The unconscious guards, the shattered balcony door, the empty room, and Joseph's expression, which was pure, undiluted rage. "They took her," Joseph said, his voice a deadly whisper. "From under my nose in my own house." Leo's eyes widened in horror. "The girl, how?" "A man, he called himself a prophet." Joseph stalked into the room, his senses screaming. Her fierce scent was layered under something else, a strange, compelling sweetness like hypnotic incense. And his own mark on her, that nascent bond, was a frayed thread stretching into a terrifying, unknown distance. It was still there, but it was thin, strained. He used her mark. He spoke of her mother. "Her mother," Leo breathed. "Mobilize everyone," Joseph commanded, the alpha crashing back over the bereft mate. His mind, cold and strategic, began to click into place alongside the howling void. "Every warrior, every tracker, seal the territory. They cannot have gone far. That device, it wasn't a teleport. The air didn't rip. It folded. They're close." As Leo sprinted to obey, another figure appeared. Timothy stood at the end of the hall, his expression unreadable. He had heard the roar. He smelled the absence. Joseph turned a savage gaze on him. "Well, Beta, your solution has presented itself. The problem is gone. Are you satisfied?" Timothy's jaw worked. For a moment, the old hatred flashed. Then something else flickered, the rigid understanding of a pack under attack. "She was under our protection, in your quarters. This is an insult to the entire Blackwood pack." He straightened. "The enemy has declared war not just on a rogue girl, but on our alpha's authority. Where do we hunt?" The shift in Timothy's stance was slight, but it was there. Grievance was one thing, a direct challenge to pack sovereignty was another. Joseph gave a sharp nod. "The scent leads west. The compulsion he used has a trace, cloying like rotten honey. Track it. Take Leo and the fastest hunters. I will lead the main force." "You're going yourself?" Timothy asked, surprised. Joseph's eyes glowed alpha-red. "He has my mate." The word hung in the air, a final, irrevocable truth. Timothy flinched, finally understanding the depth of the bond he'd witnessed. Joseph continued, "And he believes he can break what Selene has forged. I will show him the error of that belief. Personally." As the pack exploded into a frenzy of organized violence, Joseph strode to the archives. He needed answers, and he needed them an hour ago. The fragment about the celestial mark was now a lifeline. He found it, and with furious fingers pulled every related text, every myth, every lineage record. The story was fuller than he'd first realized. The celestial mark was not just a blessing of the first shifters. It was a key, a conduit for the moon goddess's own power. The bearers were meant to be guides, bridges between the mundane and the mystical. But the text held a warning, scrawled in a later margin. Where the light of the star-marked shines, shadows of fanaticism gather to corrupt its purpose. They seek to wield the key as a weapon, to break the world and remake it in their own twisted image. The prophet, the true children of Selene, they weren't just a cult, they were a historical recurrence, a cancer. And they believed Elizabeth was their destined figurehead. A young Omega librarian, trembling, approached. Alpha, the records from the border patrols. You requested any mentions of rogue movements or strange sightings over the past 5 years. What did you find? Joseph growled, not looking up from a map of ancient territories. There is a pattern, sir. Disappearances of marked females, always young, from smaller packs. Rumors of a gathering place in the western Blightlands, near the old stone circles. It was always dismissed as ghost stories. The western Blightlands, a desolate, magically scarred area where pack laws held no sway. The trail led west. It fit. If only I had known the pattern sooner, Joseph thought, guilt a sharp knife alongside the fear. If only I had looked beyond my own borders, beyond my own pride. Leo's voice echoed through the mind link, sharp and clear. Alpha, we have the trail, it's strong. They're moving fast, but not invisibly. They want to be followed. It's a trap. All traps have jaws, Joseph sent back, rolling up the maps. We just have to be the ones to spring them, hold the trail. Do not engage, wait for me. He gathered his weapons, his mind a storm of strategy and dread. Olivia intercepted him in the grand foyer, her usual composure shattered. Joseph, the pack is in an uproar. Is it true? That creature is gone. Her name is Elizabeth, he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. And she is my mate. The pack is now at war to retrieve her. Do your duty and maintain order here. Olivia's face paled at the word mate, but she nodded, the head Omega subsuming the ambitious female. The mansion will stand Alpha. The western woods were a different beast. The air grew thin and cold, the trees twisted and gray. The cheerful birdsong of Blackwood territory died, replaced by an eerie, wind-whistling silence. Joseph moved at the head of a column of 30 of his best warriors. A silent, lethal wave, following the psychic breadcrumbs left by Leo's advance team. The cloying, honeyed scent of the prophet's compulsion was now a stench, polluting the natural smells of pine and earth. It led to a sheer cliff face, riddled with caves. They're inside, Leo's mind voice came. The entrance is guarded but lightly. It feels welcoming us in. Joseph surveyed the cliff. A trap, indeed, but inside was Elizabeth. He gave a series of hand signals, splitting his force. Timothy would take a group around to seek another entrance. Leo would create a diversion. Joseph would lead the spearhead, straight down the throat of the beast. Remember, Joseph whispered to the grim faces around him, the primary objective is retrieval of the star-marked. Do not let them separate you from your units. Their faith makes them unpredictable. They flowed into the cave mouth like shadows. The interior was not a rough cavern, but a carved, temple-like space. Torches burned with a steady, unnatural blue flame, casting long, dancing shadows. The walls were covered in intricate, obsessive carvings of the moon in all its phases, and of a female figure with a star upon her brow. The air hummed with a low, chanting drone that vibrated in the teeth. They met the first resistance in a large antechamber. The prophet's followers fought with a frenzied, silent desperation. They were not trained warriors, but their fearlessness made them dangerous. Joseph moved through them like a force of nature, a whirlwind of claws and fury. His soul focused the pulsing, thinning thread of his mate bond that drew him deeper into the labyrinth. The sounds of battle, snarls, cries, the clash of bodies, echoed through the stone halls. He could hear Timothy's group engaging somewhere to his left. The diversion was working. He burst into a vast, central chamber, and his heart stopped. The chamber was dominated by a massive, ancient stone circle, its monoliths humming with captured moonlight from a shaft in the ceiling high above. At the center, on a raised dais, stood Elizabeth. She was dressed in a simple white gown, her hair loose around her shoulders. The celestial mark on her collarbone was exposed, and it was glowing, a soft, silver light that pulsed in time with the hum of the stones. Her eyes were open, but they were distant, clouded with the remnants of the compulsion. The prophet stood beside her, one hand resting on her shoulder as if presenting a prize. A dozen fanatics formed a circle around the dais, chanting. "Alpha Blackwood," the prophet said, his voice calm and carrying, devoid of the earlier compulsion but no less powerful. "You are punctual. We are about to begin the awakening." "Let her go," Joseph said, his voice echoing in the chamber. His warriors fanned out behind him, facing the circle of cultists. "She was never yours to keep," the prophet replied. "She is a child of the cosmos, a daughter of the first blood. You would keep her as a pet, a Luna for your petty kingdom. She is meant to lead us into a new age." "She is my mate," Joseph roared, the power of the Alpha flaring, pressing against the strange energy in the room. Some of the cultists faltered in their chant. The prophet smiled, a cold, pitying thing. "A biological accident, a chain. The bond can be severed here at this place of power under the true moon's gaze." Her mother understood that. At the mention of her mother, Elizabeth stirred. Her eyelids fluttered. Mother." "Yes, little star," the prophet crooned. "Your mother ran from her destiny, too. She hid your light with that pathetic rogue. But we have found you. It is time to come home." The thread between Joseph and Elizabeth gave a painful, wrenching pull. He felt a coldness, a severing, begin to creep in from the other end. The stones were glowing brighter, the moonlight focusing into a beam that illuminated Elizabeth and the prophet. "No," Joseph charged the dais. The cultists moved as one to intercept him. Battle erupted in the chamber, a chaotic, brutal melee. Joseph fought with a single-minded purpose, carving a path toward the center. He saw Timothy and his team burst in from a side tunnel, engaging the cultists from the flank. But the prophet simply watched, his hand still on Elizabeth's glowing mark. "The bond is old magic, Alpha," he called over the din. "But this," he gestured to the stones, "is older. The first shifters built these. They knew the bonds could be remade. She will be free of you." The beam of moonlight intensified. Elizabeth cried out, a sound of confusion and pain. The glow from her mark flared, lancing out not at Joseph, but into the stone circle itself. The hum became a deafening roar. Joseph, bleeding from a dozen cuts, finally broke through the last defender. He leaped onto the dais, facing the prophet. "You speak of chains," Joseph snarled. "You use compulsion, you manipulate her past, you seek to use her power for your own ends. What is that if not the heaviest chain of all?" For the first time, a flicker of anger crossed the prophet's serene face. "I am offering her freedom. You are offering her a cage of your own design." Joseph's gaze shot to Elizabeth. Her eyes were clearing, the compulsion fighting with her own terror and the raw, undeniable pull between them. "Elizabeth, look at me." Her silvered eyes, full of moonlight and fear, found his. "The bond isn't a chain," he said, his voice dropping, meant only for her. "It's a choice, my choice. I choose you, not as a prize or a key or a symbol. I choose the woman who faced me in a dirty dress without flinching." I choose my mate. The prophet snarled and pressed his hand harder against her mark. Awaken! A surge of power exploded from Elizabeth, but it didn't target Joseph. It radiated out in a blinding silver wave. The cultists were thrown back, crashing into the stones. The prophet was flung from the dais, his connection broken. The beam of moonlight shattered into 1,000 glittering fragments. In the center of the fading light, Elizabeth swayed, the glow receding from her mark. She was herself again, terrified, overwhelmed, but her own. Her eyes were locked on Joseph. The prophet rose, his composure gone, his face a mask of rage. You reject your birthright. You side with this animal. He asked, Elizabeth whispered, her voice hoarse but clear. You only ever demanded. With a shriek of fury, the prophet lunged, not at Joseph, but at Elizabeth, his hands curved into claws aimed at her mark, to destroy what he could not control. Joseph moved. It was not a calculated Alpha's move. It was the instinctual, lethal pounce of a wolf protecting its heart. He intercepted the prophet midair, his claws finding their mark. The fight was short, brutal, and final. The prophet fell, his fanatical light extinguished, his grand design crumbling to dust on the cold stone. Silence descended, broken only by the heavy breathing of the warriors and the soft, fading hum of the stones. The remaining cultists, seeing their leader fall, dropped their weapons, their fervor broken. Joseph turned, his form bloody, his chest heaving. Elizabeth stood a few feet away, shaking, the white gown stained with dust and flecks of blue torchlight. He took a step toward her, then stopped, giving her the choice. The air between them crackled with the reforged, stronger-than-steel thread of their bond, no longer thin and strained, but vibrant and whole. She took a stumbling step forward, then another. And then she was in his arms, not because of a compulsion or a debt, but because she chose to be. He held her fiercely, burying his face in her hair, inhaling her true scent, amber, fear, courage, and now, a fragile, burgeoning trust. I've got you, he murmured into her hair, his voice rough. I've got you now. Over her shoulder, he saw Timothy watching. His beta's expression was complex, grief, acceptance, and a dawning, grudging respect. Timothy gave a single, slow nod. The internal war, too, was over. Leo approached, weary but alert. The cavern is secure, Alpha. The survivors are subdued. What are your orders? Joseph looked down at Elizabeth, who was clinging to him as if he were the only solid thing in a world that had tried to break her. Bring everyone home, he said, his Alpha voice firm once more, but now layered with a new, profound gravity. The war is won. We are going home. The return to Blackwood Mansion was not a victory march, but a solemn procession. The wounded were tended. The dead were honored. The cultists were imprisoned, their fanaticism now muted, awaiting judgment. In the days that followed, the pack healed. The story of the Alpha's mate, the star-marked who had chosen the pack over power, spread through the territory, transforming suspicion into a fierce, protective loyalty. Joseph did not confine Elizabeth to the Amber Room. He gave her the run of the East Wing, then the library, then the gardens. He introduced her to the pack not as a debt payment, but as Elizabeth. He asked her questions, and he listened to her answers. He learned of a childhood spent running, of a mother who was only a whisper and a scent of jasmine, of a father whose love was weak but whose fear was strong. One evening, a week after their return, they stood on the repaired balcony of the Amber Room. The moon was a bright, benevolent silver, not a tool of compulsion. The archives, Joseph said quietly, his hand enveloping hers where it rested on the balustrade. We found a name, in a record of a small, annihilated pack from the north. A female named Alara, marked with a star. She disappeared 20 years ago. Elizabeth's breath hitched. My mother. We will find the truth of what happened to her, he promised. Together. She looked up at him, the moonlight catching in her eyes. And the bond, the prophet said it could be severed. Joseph turned to face her, his other hand coming up to cradle her cheek, his thumb brushing the line of her jaw. It can only be severed if both sides agree to break it. He searched her face. Do you wish to break it, Elizabeth? She leaned into his touch, the connection between them a warm, steady pulse. For the first time since her father had dragged her before the Alpha King, she felt not like a commodity or a key or a target. She felt anchored, chosen. No, she whispered the word of vow. I do not. He smiled then, a true, unguarded smile that transformed his stern face. Neither do I. He lowered his forehead to hers. The Alpha King expected an unattractive bride to settle a debt, he murmured, the words for her alone. But he lifted the veil and found his queen. Below them, in the mansion gardens, the pack was gathering for the evening meal. Laughter and conversation drifted up on the warm air. The scent of roasting meat and night-blooming flowers mingled. It was the sound and smell of home, of safety, of a future. Elizabeth looked out at the territory, at the woods that had once been a place of terror and were now under the protection of the man beside her. She thought of the lonely, desperate girl in a dirty dress, and of the woman she was becoming, marked by the stars and chosen by a king. She squeezed Joseph's hand, the bond between them singing a quiet, perfect note of belonging. The debt was paid. The war was over. Their story, however, was just beginning.